Hello there. This is the Women's Eye podcast, and I'm your host, Stacey Gualandi. The Women's Eye wants to help you build your money power. Okay, who out there has loaned money to a friend or has been asked to loan someone money? We all have. In fact, a friend once asked me for help, which I did, but I knew I wasn't going to get that money back, and I never did. So it can be very hard to say no. But we're going to talk about when to lend money and when to say no. But first, this episode of our Building Money Power series is brought to you by CASCO Financial Group in Phoenix, Arizona. CASCO's president, Catherine Scrivano, started her business to help people create the financial strength to achieve their dreams. Catherine, great to be with you. This is a loaded subject, right?
It is. It is. I bet everyone listening was nodding. They've had that experience, maybe on either end of it. Maybe
Yes.
they were borrowing or approaching friends or family for a loan.
Yeah. Well, why is it, I guess, when it's a family member or a friend, I'm just curious, why is this always kind of a delicate situation? Is it
Oh,
because it involves money?
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, goes into areas of control. Sometimes, especially in families, I've noticed that there's kind of an expectation as among siblings that everyone should be treated equally and that our lives should progress equally. And so
Right.
if one is more prosperous than another, there might be some resentment and a sense of entitlement. It gets into psychology that I'm probably not qualified to judge, but by experience, I've seen a lot.
Well, what are some examples of requests that people usually, ask for?
Well, it could be, someone has had a life event. They might have lost their job or their spouse or, an unexpected emergency that they weren't prepared for. Maybe it's facing up to poor financial decisions. Maybe someone's been living beyond their means and the day of reckoning has come. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes a wonderful opportunity has presented itself, and the only thing that's keeping them from taking advantage of it is lack of funds.
Lack of, exactly. So, yeah, so they are looking for maybe some assistance and, hey, help me out. We can all benefit from this, perhaps.
Even if you just have this wonderful a job opportunity or an opportunity to travel, any number of things that all of us, if we've lived long enough, we all have the story about I could have bought land for $25 an acre that's now downtown in this major city, all of those things. And so, being able to help someone if it's appropriate for you, that's a great feeling.
What are some things to consider, though, when somebody approaches you for money?
I think that the first thing is to acknowledge that there's a high likelihood that your relationship with this person is going to change going forward. It may end up being strained if repayment doesn't go as planned, if there's any misunderstandings about the nature of the loan. Can be awkward going forward. So, just realizing there's that vulnerability. Sometimes people don't have the same expectation. They may ask to borrow money, but in fact, they're expecting it to be a gift.
Oh,
You can well afford it, so I'm saying loan it to me, but you don't really expect me to pay it back to
it's
you.
like, give me a donation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that happens, not unusual. Maybe just realistic expectations about the terms and the conditions of the loan. And something to be very aware of is that once you've loaned someone money, they're probably more comfortable asking you again. So do you want to establish a pattern? So these are just all things that can be addressed, but be sure and think about them when the request is made.
Yeah. The person that I was mentioning earlier at the beginning, they came to me from, I felt so bad. I wanted to help them because they were in a really in dire straits. But recently they came back to me a couple of years later, and I think they were kind of, circling it. And I realized, okay, I think this is where this is leading. And so I kind of I cut it off right
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
because I just didn't feel it didn't feel comfortable to
Well,
me.
and sometimes you're not actually helping someone. Sometimes over the long term, you're just postponing something that's inevitable. So,
And I think that might be the case. So I felt like, oh, somebody's thinking that Stacey's she's a pushover. I might be able to go there again. But what could potentially be the impact on your own personal financial plan?
well, I'm glad that you brought that up because in my mind, that's the first thing you should think about is the request is made. The first thing you should think about is how does this affect me? And that's not selfish. That's not unsympathetic. It's realistic. Because considering that effect and then determining whether that's something that you're willing to do, because that's something that that person may be doing to you if things go badly. And so there's that relationship conversation I was talking about earlier. But
Because it might benefit them, but ultimately helping someone else could hurt you.
could hurt you. Yeah, and there's that resentment story that I mentioned earlier. But thinking about how does it affect your plan, and as you're considering the factors, think about what it's going to cost you to help them. If you've got cash stashed under your mattress, there's not much to think about. There's your potential cost. But if you're having to withdraw money from an institution that's paying you interest, if you're selling mutual funds or stocks or having to borrow yourself to be able to provide the loan, any number of ways, income taxes may be a factor for you too. So loaning someone a specific amount may cost you a little bit more, and that should presumably be that total amount that they're on the hook for repaying.
You mentioned stocks. That reminded me of another situation where somebody said, "Hey, this is a great stock tip. You got to come in on it," and you spend the money and then you get burned. So
Yeah.
is that kind of the same thing?
Only if they're going to benefit somehow, from your purchase of the stock, and that's a whole manipulation
Yeah,
conversation.
I know.
Yeah,
That would be a whole other
right.
podcast.
Right. Yeah, things to avoid.
Yeah. Well, if you do decide, if myself or anybody else watching and listening, if they do decide to lend money, what are the things to consider?
I think that the first piece of advice that I would have is get everything in writing where both parties understand what the terms of the agreement are. And that's going to include that principal amount, the amount, if any, of interest that's going to be charged, how
Do you
repayment.
always pay interest? Do you always add that on? Or if
If I'm
somebody,
taking money out from under my mattress, and
okay,
this is a really good faith loan, it's not costing me anything, but I'm loaning it to you very willingly, perhaps I'm not going to charge you any interest. But I am interested in what are the terms of repayment. Are you going
okay.
to make monthly payments, or is a period of time going to pass? You're going to just pay me all at once, some combination of those two. But let's have agreement and clarity about the terms of the loan, because this is often a real emotional conversation. And, we may walk away with different
Awkward.
interpretations. So putting it in writing is not, yeah, it's not a matter of trust, it's a matter of clarity.
Also,
It
too,
could be a matter of trust as well, but
right,
matter
because
of clarity is
I mean,
important.
it does, to me, whenever there is some sort of a transactional thing, that's always the first thing you think of when you see that person too,
Yeah,
right? It's like, oh,
exactly.
wow, hey, friend, but oh goodness, back of mind, you owe me
You owe
money.
me money, right?
So
Yeah,
that can be
that's the
frustrating.
awkward and estrangement that I was talking about as a potential, just a new factor in your relationship going forward.
One thing, is there where you hold some sort of collateral? I
Yes,
guess, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's not, I mean, if you were dealing with a financial institution, chances are very good that they're going to put a lien on your car, on your home, a variety of ways that collateral might be assumed. So this might be an appropriate thing between friends and family as well.
Well, we're kind of talking about, the things that might play a factor, or you really have to, where you're needing to protect yourself. What are the benefits, the positives of loaning somebody money?
Well, a potential is this might be a way to create income for you. Again, back to my mattress, if that money is earning me nothing, but I loan it to you and charge you a rate of interest, that benefits me over the long term if it's paid back as agreed, etc. Generally, the benefit comes to the feeling of helping someone that you want to help. Again, I'm assuming everything goes as planned.
Right.
That
It's
that
just a
you're
kind gesture, and you as you give the money, you're like, this is whatever happens, I just feel good about giving money.
Yeah, exactly. It feels if the relationship is such that you're going to feel good about helping someone take advantage of an opportunity or avoid negative consequences, that in itself is great. That's tax-free. But again, being cognizant of what the cost to you and the consequence to you. Another thing that people often don't think about is establishing what happens if you pass away. Does that person still owe the money to the estate? I see it a lot of times with families where parents may have loaned money to one of the children, so that reduces the estate for other children. So,
Ooh.
we talk through and try and deal with is the share of the person who borrowed money, maybe their share of the estate is reduced by the amount of the loan that's still outstanding. That's a great conversation to have while you're establishing the terms of the loan, not while you're at the memorial service.
Exactly, not after the fact, and again, that
Yeah,
whole get it in writing,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
really
exactly.
the do you have some examples of situations where you've helped, or perhaps, no situations where this has come into play?
Well,
Positive, negative, what
yeah, well, it's come up a lot of times. The conversation about the estate is a frequent one. I'm thinking of actually two very similar stories with very different outcomes. There was one where we had a client referred to us by her CPA, a lovely woman well into her 80s, whose husband had passed away, and he had always taken care of the family finances. She just didn't have a lot of experience. So we did a lot of work and established that if she lived what I'm just going to call a reasonable lifestyle, she was going to have plenty of money. She would be fine for the rest of her life. But after a while, her son approached her and said, "Mom, I've got over $100,000 in credit card debt. I'm paying the credit card companies 14% or more.
Oof.
What if you loan me $100,000, pay off all of my debt, I'll pay you 6%. So I'm saving that money, and you'll have a guaranteed, can you see the air quotes here? Guaranteed rate of return of 6% on your money."
Okay.
So the CPA and I talked through this, and we recommended that she not loan her son the money because, number one, most of her money was in an IRA. So that withdrawal of $100,000 was going to be taxable and
Yep.
significant taxes.
To her, yeah.
Yeah. And it was going to, frankly, reduce the likelihood of her being as comfortable as we felt before. She might have to start monitoring her spending in case he wasn't
It
making
becomes a
those
burden to her as opposed to it
right.
helps him, but yet she's the one that gets
And
put.
frankly, we had a little bit of concern about her being repaid by someone. I hate to say anything bad about anyone's son,
Sure.
but
But he
but
got himself
frankly,
into a bad
yeah,
situation.
I mean,
Yeah.
$100,000 of credit card debt, that suggests somebody who's not really in control of their finances.
No.
And also thinking about the siblings. So, it's reduced the estate by quite a bit. I mean, she is 80 years old, so likely not going to live that much longer. So we just really couldn't justify why this would be a good idea, much to the dismay of the son. But it
Exactly.
felt
So
like
he
the
needed
right,
to figure out a plan B, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah. I think that that was probably the right decision, and
But
difficult and emotional,
sure, because
but
we're
yeah, because it's
applying all
family.
great things
Yeah.
about ourselves. But then almost exactly the same experience, a couple whose daughter was in school. She was really underemployed. She was really concentrating on getting her degree and was just working rather menial jobs, not making much money. And they were aware that she was really struggling. So they kind of confronted her and said, let us see what your financial circumstances are. And she was using credit to live, to pay daily living expenses. And of course, that snowballs because now you've got interest on those dollars, which increase your monthly payments, which
Yeah.
mean that you
She
have
couldn't
even
pay it
less.
off every month, right? Yeah.
So they offered her, they said, we'd like to repay or pay off all of your debt and set up a payment plan where you're comfortable, where you don't have to use credit for living expenses. And she was adamant she didn't want to do it. But they finally compromised and said, if I approved, if I looked at everything and could establish that it wasn't going to hurt their plan, their financial plan. So we went through all of the numbers and I cautioned them all the negative things that you and I have been talking about that potentially could happen. They decided to make the loan, and this one has a happy ending. She
Oh,
paid it
great.
back faster than expected. They have the satisfaction of knowing that they helped her, and, I mean, this is just a lovely family. The siblings got included. I don't know that that's always necessary, but the siblings gave their blessing, so it was just a happy ending. Someone going through school, I mean, that's a very difficult time to
That's,
try and carry that burden and work.
but it sounds like she was very disciplined, very focused, and wanted to make good on all of this.
And
But
a and she wanted to be responsible, she wanted that independence because when you loan somebody money, it's kind of implied from now on you're entitled to be judgmental about how they spend their money.
right, I know.
And so
It's
you
like,
can
wait a minute,
sometimes
give them
yeah,
$1,000 and they're out,
yeah,
having champagne dinners.
exactly, exactly, yeah, buy a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter. You can't be going out to eat for another
No.
meal. So that can be, a place that it can turn into a positive. Sometimes I suggest that having the family member come to you and saying, "I've got these issues," may open a door for you to suggest that they start taking some classes, just
Yes.
start getting educated. Maybe you do it with them and
Well,
support them.
Well, that leads me to my next question because it really seems to be that when you want to have money boundaries or money lending boundaries, that it really is a skill.
Oh,
It's a
absolutely, yeah.
learned skill. So, yeah, it's I guess you have to be trained or train yourself to do that. What are the skills needed?
Well, my first recommendation is don't respond immediately. So if someone asks to borrow money, acknowledge the request and say, "I'll get back to you."
Okay.
Because, if they're crying, if they're upset, making them feel better immediately is a real temptation. But if you say, "No, I need to think about it," or "I need to look at my resources," that gives you a chance, if you're going to say no,
Yeah.
to kind of rehearse the way that you say no, or there may be a no, but, and say, I'm not going to loan you money, but I'll provide childcare 2 days a week, which would save you some money. Or I'll get together with you on weekends and we'll meal prep together and save money on, so you might be able to find other ways to help rather than
Get
actually
creative.
loaning the money.
Yeah,
Another
I'm the
thing that,
type that will automatically say, "Okay,"
yeah,
but
oh, all of
I
us.
don't realize that I can say, "Oh, wait, you know what? Let me think about this."
Let me think about it, and that again, it gives you a chance to kind of rehearse your response if you're going to say no. Um, Make sure that you're only loaning anything you can afford to lose.
Okay,
Hamlet said neither a lender or borrower be, and that's because there's a chance that you may not see this money again. So consider what the impact to you personally would be if that was the case.
that's kinda like living here in Las Vegas and going and playing blackjack a little
Oh,
bit. You're
sure.
like, you give yourself a certain amount, but,
Right, right,
yeah.
and then push away from the table and go do something else. And then the last thing I can't say enough, strongly enough, is be specific about your expectations going forward and get them in writing.
Gotcha.
And it's not so much because I'm going to take this piece of paper into court and sue you if you don't pay. It's more so that there are no misunderstandings. There could be very good faith
Yes.
misunderstandings about the consequences of this loan. So just get it in writing and everybody agree.
Because if it's right there, black and white, no one
Right.
can dispute that. You've agreed on it, because a lot of times if it's just a verbal agreement, somebody might have
Yeah,
misunderstood or,
sure.
innocently enough. And then that obviously can cause problems down
And,
the
I
line.
wanted to offer one other suggestion that I think is kind of a great fit and very underutilized is perhaps instead of loaning the person the money outright, you take that money, deposit in an account in a bank or a credit union,
Oh,
and then that becomes collateral for a loan to them. So
that,
they can borrow, and really the relationship now is between them and the credit union.
okay.
And people will tend to respect that a little more because it's the institution, it's a little more formal.
Yeah.
The risk is they don't pay it back, and the financial institution, takes your savings because you use that as collateral. But that's where you would have ended up anyway, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
loaned it and they didn't pay it back. So there's really no change to you. But I think having that third party, somewhat formalized agreement, yeah, that can be just a solution where you're still helping them, but not quite getting as involved as you might otherwise.
This is fantastic. I don't get asked, to lend money very often, but this is all fantastic information.
Oh,
So
good.
well, prepare me the next time it should
Well,
happen. But
the first thing is you're gonna ask for a day or 2 to think about it, and then you're
uh-huh.
gonna go back and replay this podcast.
I know. It's like, listen to Catherine Scrivano on the Women's Eye, the building your money power. So with all the information you gave, though, is there that, like, maybe the top three things you want to really drive home to those listening right now?
My top 3 are going to be only lend what you can afford to lose, insist that you have some time to think about the request, think all the way through, and be specific and get it in writing.
Yep. I think that is fantastic advice, but because obviously I believe people will really relate to this, because it probably happens more often than not, right?
Sure, sure, and I don't wanna focus on the potential negatives to end up not paying attention to what a wonderful thing it is to help somebody. So,
Yes. And that was, the times that we have done it, myself and or me and my husband, it really we did feel good about being able to help somebody,
yeah,
in their time,
yeah,
and maybe it took one of the people like a long time to pay it back, but they did, and it helped them in a tough time. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
was a good thing.
Yeah, but as
So,
long as you're not enabling, like I say, the inevitable, and sometimes that's the case,
yep.
all you've done you haven't helped them and you've hurt yourself, so just don't go there.
Don't go there.
Blame
So,
me.
we went there, and I thank you so much, Catherine, for your advice as always. So I really appreciate you being here today.
I
Well,
enjoy it.
yay. Well, for more fun financial facts and to find out more about Catherine, just go to thewomenseye.com. And there you'll also find, we've got a couple of books, 20 Women Change Makers. Just shop wherever you buy books, and changemakersbook.com, and 20 women storytellers at womenstorytellersbook.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and our YouTube channel so you can see us as well as hear us. Again, thank you, Catherine, and to all of you for tuning in to the Women's Eye podcast. Keep building your money power. I'm Stacey Gualandi. Remember, it's the world as we see it.